Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Verdigris by Michele, yet another author who's been on my radar for a very long time. When I was growing up, my parents always used to say that I was never happy. As soon as they bought me a toy or a VHS, I immediately started complaining about the next knick-knack that I wanted. And looking back from the vantage point of my 33 years on Earth, I can definitely say that they're right. As a case in point, as an example of this, when I was living in Italy, I only ever wanted to read American authors, and I was always importing their books or buying them from bookshops at a fairly steep price. And now that I live in an English-speaking country and I have all these books at my hand, all that I want to read are Italian or French books. A consequence of this predicament is that the Italian authors that I see around in bookshops from my exile are not always the same authors who are trending or who are popular at any given moment back in Italy, back home. Mari, for instance, is an author who really wasn't on my radar when I was living in Italy. I wasn't aware of his books and of his oeuvre, but he seems to be very popular at the moment in the UK. I see his books a lot around UK bookshops. Definitely thanks in part to the beautiful editions put out by his UK publisher and Other Stories, one of the best UK independent presses. On one of these editions, Mari is described as Italy's great chronicler of the macabre and of growing up geeky. So he sounded very much up my alley, but I couldn't possibly imagine how much I was going to love Verdigris and Mari's style. Verdigris, as much as Piranesi by Susanna Clarke or The Keep by Jennifer Egan, both novels that I love, especially The Keep is one of my very favorite novels, they are all first and foremost small, perfect Gothic puzzles. Verdigris' premise is simple and the parameters of the story are very clear, but at the same time the shadow realm of the story, all of the things that are not said in the narrative but are left for the reader to imagine, are immense and extremely vivid. This book casts a shadow that is much larger than a book of this size really should. Verdigris is the story of Michelino, its 13-year-old narrator, a bookish kid who is enamored with Lovecraft and Poe and adventure stories. And it is the story of Felice, the custodian of the lakeside mansion on the shores of Lago Maggiore in northern Italy that belongs to Michelino's grandparents and where Michelino spends the summers of his childhood. Felice is very much of an orc. He is a gruff man with a bad temper, harsh manners, and even harsher opinions. But Michelino is very big into monsters, and he loves Felice dearly, and the two have a very strange but very strong friendship. At the beginning of the novel, however, a problem makes itself apparent. Felice, who is getting old, has started losing his memory, and he is starting to lose the very words that he uses to make up his world and to understand the world around him. And this is a strange process that makes him lose contact with his reality, but at the same time brings in sharp relief certain episodes from his past and from the traumatic past of this little region, this area, the nearby towns. Certain traumatic episodes, especially dating back to the final years of World War II. Michelino then embarks on this very ambitious semiotic linguistic experiment where he is trying at once to save his friend's memory and also to uncover the secret history of Felice and of the nearby towns, a story that seems to be lifted straight from one of his beloved adventure stories. Verdigris is so manneristic, so archetypal in setting up this Gothic enigma that it hurts, and I say this in the sweetest, most complimentary way possible. We have a young but highly impressionable hero, a monster who is not all that he seems, a crumbling villa overrun by vegetation and infested in particular by a strange, overrun by a strange species of slugs that seem to be crawling out of the very ground in large numbers. Felice in particular is obsessed with them, is obsessed with exterminating them, and for whatever reason he keeps calling them the French slugs. There are more than a few skeletons in the closet in this novel, sometimes literally. All of this should not in any way suggest that Verdigris is bland or that it relies on stale tropes to build its enigma, to build its story. Quite the opposite. This is the work of somebody who, just like Michelino, and you will have noticed that the protagonist and the author share the same name. It's the work of somebody who has absorbed so much Gothic fiction that they can play with the elements and the features of this genre in ways that exploit them and subvert them at the same time. In this sense, this is definitely a book with a fairly strong postmodern vibe to it, for lack of a better word. It's a book that is very self-conscious, but in a fashion that in no way comes in the way of our enjoyment of the story, but that just casts everything we're reading in a state of uncertainty that is typical of the fantastic genre. Are we exploring alongside Michelino the seat of unspeakable, horrible crimes? Or are we just letting our imagination run wild, influenced perhaps by our impressionable narrator? The closest example of another author who manages to have their cake and eat it to the same extent, they manage to offer a commentary on a given literary genre that is also a great work in that given genre, would be Umberto Eco. I'm thinking of the occult mysteries in Foucault's Pendulum, for instance, or the doppelganger secret identity narrative in The Prague Cemetery. Another feature of Verdigris that called to mind Eco very strongly for me is the book's fascination with the world of symbols, the way we use symbols to make sense of our world, whether we're talking of concrete symbols of any kind or of words, the material that makes up our thoughts, our identities, and our histories. In this sense, The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana by Umberto Eco is very much a cousin novel to Verdigris, because that book also deals with an old man trying to heal his failing memory, doing so in a villa in the countryside in northern Italy, and coming to terms with the traumatic history of the resistance to Nazi occupation in the final years of World War II. The two books have lots to say to each other, is what I'm trying to say. In fact, the pitfall of Verdigris, something I have to mention for the benefit of non-Italian readers, is that much of its charm and its power, especially in the first half of the novel, comes from the way it plays with the Italian language. As he is helping Felice preserve as much of his memory and his vocabulary as possible, Michelino, for instance, gives him a felce, a fern, to hang above his bed so that he can look at it when he wakes up in the morning and remember his name, because the word felice is very close to the word felce, the word for fern in Italian. These and all sorts of small linguistic games occur in the course of the book that inevitably are going to be lost or warped in translation. Similarly, another thing that's inevitably going to be lost is the way, which I think is very significant, the fact that while Michelino and his grandpa speak in fairly perfect Italian, Felice only speaks in a strange Lombard dialect that is very guttural and very harsh, and it's a bit of a linguistic invention of its own, and it almost feels like a little bit of a mini-game within the puzzle of the novel itself. And I don't envy the translator, Brian Robert Moore, who had to try and convey all of these dimensions in the English translation, and who, by the way, talks very beautifully about his passion for Michele Mari and for other Italian writers, and about his the way he approaches his craft. I'll try and link out to an interview with a translator in the description box, because he has lots of interesting things to say. Even with the loss of this linguistic dimension, Verdigris is a gem, and I would recommend it even to English readers or readers reading the book in any other translation. If you're in any way fascinated with Gothic fiction, with ghoulish mysteries, or with family enigmas, stories of family and small town intrigue, you're going to love this book. Before I conclude the review, I have to talk about the ending without spoiling anything, just because it was certainly peculiar. When I looked it up online, most people seem to be baffled by the ending. I certainly was, at least as much. I was baffled enough to look it up online, which is not something I usually do. I liked it a lot. I thought it was a very strong ending, and it felt clear enough to me. But I can see how other readers might be frustrated with it. I think the novel definitely offers a few, perhaps even contradictory clues as to how we should read the ending. What I'm trying to say is that you should maybe be prepared for it, but I don't think the ending, regardless of what you're going to think about it, is going to take away from the enjoyment of the novel as a whole. Read Verdigris, it's fantastic. I'll be going to Italy in a couple of weeks, and I fully plan on stocking up on several more Mari novels and to dive into his fiction later in the year. If you've read him, please let me know what you thought. If you've read Verdigris, I absolutely recommend The Keep by Jennifer Egan, one of my favorite books. If you haven't read it yet, I think you would probably enjoy it a lot if you enjoyed Verdigris. And yeah, I look forward to discussing all of this in the comments, as always. Thank you for watching the review. Bye, everybody.